Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session at the Paris Peace Forum. My name is Casper KLYNGE. I'm the Vice President for European Government Affairs in Microsoft. And together with a pretty amazing panel, I'm looking forward to helping guide you through the session on cybersecurity capacity building, leveraging international collaboration to further advance international peace and stability online. If for nothing else, I think we have, the first prize for the longest title for one of the events at the Paris Peace Forum. This is, of course, the fourth version of the Paris Peace Forum. As we've heard yesterday from the many speakers, I mean, this is a significant multilateral and multi-stakeholder event where we really feel also in Microsoft that the Paris Peace Forum brings together the world and so many different stakeholders in discussing some of the most pertinent, most urgent issues on the global stage. And one of the discussion points that we would like to focus on in today's session is, of course, cybersecurity, but also looking a little bit south from where we're sitting here in Paris, looking towards Africa and looking at the resilience in mitigating what is unfortunately an accelerating problem, not only in Africa, but around the world, namely the problem of cybersecurity. We have seen in the last 1.5 years during the very challenging global pandemic, not only how necessary it is for us to be able to go digital. We're meeting today in a virtual format that is only necessary, only possible through the technology that we have around. But we've also seen that with this increased and accelerated digitization, there also follows vulnerabilities, not least from the cyber attack that we see coming towards us in an increased way. Last year at the Paris Peace Forum, we launched together with the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, a new initiative focusing really on building cyber security capacities in Africa. It's a project in Microsoft that we're very happy to support. It's something we think matters a whole lot, and it's definitely something we'll dive into in today's session. And what better way to do that at a Paris Peace Forum where the main theme is Mind the Gaps. Sitting here in Europe and doing a lot of activities in Europe, one of the key topics that we are definitely discussing, perhaps not only in Europe, around the world, is the question around digital sovereignty. How do we make sure that, countries, decision makers, companies, NGOs, civil society are able to be in control to determine their own future and make sure that the sovereignty of the digital world still remains in the hands of democracies. I think what is interesting with the digital sovereignty discussion is how alive or well and kicking it is, not least in Europe, in the US, Asia, etc. But I think one of the questions is, can you have sovereignty without cybersecurity? And therefore, one of the questions I will be posing to the panelists today is, how does the digital sovereignty discussion look from an African perspective, not least when you pair it together with the question of cybersecurity? When you look at cybersecurity resistance or resilience in Africa, there are some numbers that the African Union put forward a few years ago that indicates that perhaps there is more to do. When you look at the number of national cybersecurity strategies, the number of certs, the activities in cybersecurity, Africa is unfortunately trailing somewhat behind compared to the global statistics on this. So one of the questions we'll definitely focus on is, how does that look today, and how can we leverage partnerships, both from the public sector but also from the private sector, in assisting in building the necessary capabilities across Africa. We have a fantastic panel, and I don't want to take too much of your time, so we'll jump straight into the discussions with a number of, I think, very interesting interventions. I'll ask my fellow panelists to spend the first 3 to 5 minutes giving sort of a first introduction on how they look at these issues seen from their respective chairs. We'll be talking to the African Union, we'll be speaking to the German Development Cooperation Agency, and we'll also be speaking to Oxford University. But the first panelist I'm very, very happy to introduce, and I hope that I will get the name pronounced the right way, otherwise I apologize in advance, but it is Towela NYIRENDA-JERE, who is the acting head of division at the Economic Integration Division of the African Union Development Agency. So we are very, very honored to have you here, and look forward to your first intervention, Towela. Thanks very much.
And good morning and good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're joining from. So my name is Towela NYIRENDA-JERE, and you did a fairly good job of pronouncing the name. And I'm with the African Union Development Agency based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we are the technical arm of the African Union. So I think on behalf of our CEO, Dr. Mayaki, I would first of all extend appreciation to the organizers of the Paris Peace Forum for the invitation to participate in this very important discussion. And I think just by way of contextualizing and really responding to the question around really what is it that the AUDNF is doing in the context of cybersecurity and cyber capacity building, but also looking at the broader context of where we see things perhaps evolving and emerging in the next 5 years. So from the AUDNF's perspective, we are charged, of course, with supporting the African Union in the implementation of priority programs and projects in line with Agenda 2063, and cybersecurity is one of those flagship programs. So we are basically supporting the AUC in terms of various initiatives related to data protection and privacy, related to cyber capacity building, related to cybersecurity, child online protection, and a number of initiatives that really speak to the digital transformation strategy of the Union. I think where we see in terms of the next 5 years and where we are going, we are all aware, of course, of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the fact that officially trading started under that regime this year. So issues around the digital economy, I think, are very important for us, and we see cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and cyber capacity building as a very important aspect of achieving the aspirations of the Continental Free Trade Area. And I think this aligns very well in terms of the experience, I think, of the EU in terms of the single digital market, and we would want to learn from the experiences of our European counterparts. And really see how do we bring those to bear as we talk about moving Africa forward in the next 5 years. So let me stop there for now, and then I will provide further context as we go along.
Well, thanks very much. If I may, just a quick follow-up question to you before we move to the next panelist. Is your sense, working out of Africa, that the realization of the importance of cybersecurity is on the rise?
Definitely, I would say that the awareness and the appreciation for cybersecurity definitely is increasing. I mean, you've already alluded to the fact that COVID-19 sort of forced us into very quickly becoming digitalized across very many facets of life. And with that digitalization, obviously came the cognizance of the need to make sure that our transactions and our engagements online were safe and secure, and that there was an element of being able to trust the provision of services which we had enjoyed in the physical world and which we were now being forced to go through in a virtual space.
Thank you. That's so helpful. Thanks a lot for adding that at the end. Then I will move very quickly to Sadie CREESE, who is, I think, joining us from the UK. Sadie is the founding director of the Global Cybersecurity Capacity Center at the Oxford Martin School, where she also continues, I think you can confirm that, to serve as the director conducting research into what constitutes really cybersecurity, national cybersecurity capacities, working with countries, with international organizations, and perhaps also with the private sector. Sadie, it's great to have you with us today, and I will immediately also pass the floor to you for your initial remarks.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind invitation to join the event and to speak with so many important and knowledgeable colleagues. At Oxford, for the past number of years, with the Global Cybersecurity Capacity Centre, have been highly focused on helping countries around the world to understand what it means to have national cybersecurity capacity and to be able to self-assess, to benchmark exactly how they're doing. The idea being that this can underpin investments moving forward. One of the primary outputs of the centre is the capacity maturity model we refer to as the CMM, And that is the model by which countries can do this benchmarking. It's been used by over 85 countries around the world now, including many countries in Africa and Europe for that matter. It's been incredibly successful in itself as a cyber capacity building tool because it's so broad. It sees national capacity as being as much about the ability to set good strategy and policy for the country, understanding what we all need to do in terms of social mindsets, what we need the whole of society to be able to engage in, what it means to train and educate our business leaders, right down to our school children, so that we understand how to protect our systems. It's about good law, regulation, incentivizing good behaviours from business. And it's also about having access to the right protective technologies and standards. And so it's such a broad model. And in order to understand how we're doing, we have to engage so many different stakeholders from across society. It involves business. Much of our critical infrastructures are in the hands of business. It involves those that are in charge of governing, but it also involves civil society. And so it's very important to bring all of these conversations to the table because they're all part of the solution. So that's been hugely successful. And what we've done most recently is we've begun working with partners around the world to help embed this in the regions. And we have a centre that we work with called C3SA, based down in Cape Town. And we've been partnering with them in the African region, the Southern African region most recently. As we look to the future, one of the things that we're very keen and we're beginning to research deeply now is that we help the world plan for future shocks, that we get better as an international community at not just doing the day job, the immediate operational issues of addressing significant harms that we might be perceiving from a lack of cybersecurity right now, or underpinning our future strategic investments, whether that's growing our economies, becoming the future of industry in our region. I know there's countries in Africa that are very focused on that, or supporting financial inclusion for societies. But we also have one eye on, let's learn from the pandemic and let's try and prepare, understand, using our imagination for exactly what might go wrong, where might we be introducing hidden and systemic cyber risk, something that we need to be able to anticipate, and we need to be able to join our capacity building investments to ensure that we're prepared for those futures too. Thank you.
Sadie, thanks very much for that. And I will also use the opportunity just to ask you a quick follow-up question, because you did mention the cyber maturity model. And I think it's fair to say that that has become an important tool around the world, and congratulations for developing that model. Now, if we look at Europe and if we look at Africa, can you give us sort of a little bit of a sneak peek on what the findings are in terms of what is the state of play here at the end of 2021 when you look at both Europe, but perhaps even more so towards Africa?
There's no easy answer for that because, of course, every country has different priorities and they're in different positions. But what we can say is some countries are making good progress. They've got good building blocks in place. Very often that is to do with ensuring that you have national strategy, you understand who's responsible for investing and leading on building cybersecurity capacity. They've got in place some idea of educational programs. They've got in place some fundamental aspects of law that enable them to not just deter bad behaviours, but underpin good regulation and incentivize strong behaviours in business. So things are changing at different paces. The one thing that we've always noticed is challenging for countries can often be how you connect with the wider discourse of the country. So really understanding how to build responsible behaviour into the wider society's mindset, and really understanding how to do that whilst also innovating and taking advantage of digital tech. I should say that we are just custodians of the CMM. We work with people from around the world from all sorts of sectors to evolve this model. And it's very important that we all understand that it exists for all of us. And for that reason, we share widely and we spend a lot of time trying to help other people use it too.
Thanks a lot for that, Sadie. I might come back and try and get a few more answers out of you on this one, despite the complexity and despite of how this tool is being used in individual countries. But I want to move to our next speaker, which I'm very happy to have on the panel as well. A warm welcome to Sabine Müller, who is the Director General for Africa, working in the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ. And Sabine, it's great to have you on the panel. And as with the other speakers, I'll invite you to say a couple of words for the first 3-5 minutes, and then we'll come back to Q&As after that. Sabine, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, good morning, and thank you very much also from my side for inviting us to this panel. And as we have heard already, cybercrime is on the rise, and cybersecurity is a growing issue for all of us all over the world. And if we look at the global cybersecurity index, this index suggests that Africa's levels of commitment to cybersecurity, even if there are considerable efforts, remain still low. So we think, firstly, we have to put cybersecurity capacity building high up on the agenda. And we think that the Malabo Convention is an important step into this direction. So in order to achieve that, I think we have to work together also with all the member states. And very often African countries are misused also as senders of cyber attacks for criminal activities, for example, in phishing emails. And however, it is often really not certain if these attacks actually originate from these countries. And this is also due to lack of knowledge and experience, but also of legislation and infrastructure that many countries in the world cannot defend themselves. And indirectly, even their reputation suffers now. And this can also lead to companies and foreign investors refraining from economic cooperation with these countries. So it's also from this side very important to work on cybersecurity. And the cybersecurity begins with the procurement of secure IT infrastructure. And once this is in place, we need to ensure that people are able to handle it. So therefore, capacity building and training in the different sectors is an important pillar. We work, for instance, at the continental level, we work together with the African Union and created a digital policy expert pool, which can be used by the African Union to receive the relevant technical expertise. And at the same time, we see also a great benefit in the awareness-raising measures, as has been mentioned before. And here we believe that cooperation with civil society is an important factor, as well as building networks and regional expert communities. But you have also to start first at home, and also within the GIZ as an organization. We have taken various measures in recent years to fight cybercrime, because we are also subject to many cyber attacks. And our own Cybersecurity Operations Center was established in 2018. And in the recent years, we have introduced mandatory webinars and training for all staff all over the world. And for example, special data protection and information security training, safe internet surfing, or how to deal with malicious emails. And I think this kind of training is really important, even if people sometimes don't consider it important. And we are currently establishing a worldwide information security management system and are planning to set up our own corporate unit for information governance. And finally, as we are a project implementing organization, I'm convinced that we have to include aspects of cybersecurity now already in the planning and designing stage of projects in order really to create sustainable solutions. Maybe so far at the moment.
Sabine, thanks so much for these initial remarks as well. Super helpful also to get a development cooperation perspective from this. And if I may just add a follow-up question to you. I have a past also working inside governments, also with development cooperation, far from always an easy task. But I think when you look historically on development cooperation, there has been not a lot of focus on the cybersecurity side of matters. You gave us a very good overview of how you're working within GIZ, increasingly with cybersecurity. My question to you is that a phenomenon you're seeing across development cooperation agencies in Europe, around the world, that there is a recognition that to help vulnerable societies also requires us to help with digital solutions that are stable, that are safe, that are secure?
Yes, I would say so. No, I think there's a rising consciousness that this is important. This is an important issue, and not only with the development agencies, but also with our partner countries. No, because you can see these. We have very interesting cooperations, for instance, in Kenya, where we have kind of together with our partners a digital center to improve the environment for digital development. And there, in this framework, we work also together with our Kenyan partners on cybersecurity issues. And we receive also a lot of demand from other partner countries really to go into this. So I see there is a raising awareness, and I would also say in the development community, I think this issue becomes more and more important.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Towela, I'd like to go back to you now. One of the last sort of trips I did before COVID-19 really kicked in was to Accra in Ghana, and had a number of meetings also with the government. And I thought what was particularly interesting was, of course, the recognition that massive investments would be necessary also in digitalization and skilling, and making sure that we would be helping also societies and governments across Africa do more in an area that is no longer nice to have, but it is really needed to have. Now, fast forward to 1.5 years later after COVID-19, you mentioned it as well. It is so evident that being online, having access to digital solutions, having the right skill sets among the population is absolutely critical, both to go through COVID-19, but also to do well in the digital economy. One minister said to me during that visit in Ghana that, hey, it's fantastic you're coming here, you're saying how important it is for us to focus on data protection, on cybersecurity issues, but we can't afford to focus too much on that. We need the investments, we need to upgrade our societies just to get by. And I would love to get your views on how you see this. Is there a dilemma here? Is there a schisma? And what can we do to better support governments across Africa?
Thank you very much for that. So maybe before I respond to that question, just very quickly, just to touch on what Sadie said about the CMM and the utility of it and how it's proliferating. She mentioned the C3SA Center in Cape Town, and I just wanted to underscore the fact that as a UDNEPAD, we are actually also engaged with that center, specifically for the aspect of seeing how do we actually strengthen the collaboration around cybersecurity assessments. From our perspective, we saw value in the CMM in linking it to assessments that we were doing around the Malabo Convention, which Sabine also mentioned, and really seeing what kinds of interventions were needed at the country level to really help our member states in terms of skilling and addressing some of the challenges that they were facing with cyber capacity issues. So going to your question about the dilemma, I think the dilemma will always be there in a way. But from our perspective, I think what we always try to underscore and promote is the fact that one mustn't look at digitalization in isolation. One mustn't look at it as a nice to have. I think it's very clear that it's something that's a very necessary part of our trajectory for development, and therefore we need to find ways and means of embedding it and integrating it and mainstreaming it across all our various development sectors. So when you look, for instance, at the digital transformation strategy, I think it's very clear about being able to incorporate issues around investments in digitalization that can be used in education, that will speak to issues around agriculture, trade, health, and so on. So if we take that approach, then I think it's a way that it tells us that as we're making these investments whether it's into hard infrastructure or we're making investments into other aspects of these sectoral priorities, that mainstreaming digital services, mainstreaming capacity building for digital transformation becomes a necessary prerequisite if we are indeed going to achieve the objectives that we want to.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, Towela. And then perhaps going back to you, Sadie, and trying to get you to say a little bit more about the work that you're doing on the CMM, the cyber maturity model around the world. In terms of bringing together multiple stakeholders and using this tool to really assist in the best possible way, can you say a couple more words about it? And I know that you will refrain from sort of giving the overall assessment of whether it's going bad or good in countries, but I would love to get perhaps you to say something about the trajectory and perhaps also what the trajectory has been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, of course. Well, so the first thing to say, just acknowledging all the interventions that have been made so far, and to agree with colleagues. One of the reasons the CMM has become so successful is because of all of the collaboration that we've had with partner countries who are using it, and also with the international development community, who, as you have been saying, have been folding this into these wider projects that involve ICT or digital in some way, because, as colleagues have said, if we're building clean water plants, banks of the future, if we're building logistics systems, factories, just the communication infrastructure to support very small businesses and family businesses, in hard-to-reach parts of our countries, whatever it is we're doing, where we have digital inside, it's imperative that we protect the integrity and the reliability of these systems. And so cybersecurity in that sense is about achieving resilience in the face of insecurity. And the model is there to help countries really understand the breadth of the challenge, to give them a framework within which they can evidence for themselves how they're doing, and then understand how to do better, what more to invest in. And so it's become incredibly important. And to reflect on how the world's doing, well, we're seeing in some parts of the world, for example, in Latin America, there's been a huge push from the Organization of American States and the Inter-Americas Development Bank to underpin working with countries to develop national cybersecurity strategies. And of course, if you get yourself a national cybersecurity strategy in place, then you're building a mandate inside the country. Part of doing that will take you through a risk assessment, understanding what your priorities are, and linking that to good positive outcomes for what it is that country wants to achieve for its citizens, and also how it sees itself on the international stage, what it wants to achieve in terms of trade. All of these aspects will be folded into a strategy, and it also involves, in the ideal sense, understanding who's responsible, where's the agency for delivering on the strategy. And so it is a fundamental building block, and what we're seeing around the world is that countries are investing time and effort in understanding that they need one of these, they're going to develop one of these, and all the other aspects of governance and agency that need to sit around it. The importance of the multi-stakeholder perspective is a duality of not just these are the customers of what it is we're trying to achieve. Everybody in our societies is part of it. We don't do cybersecurity for its own reasons. We do it because we need it, and that's what justifies the resource. But we have to understand these stakeholders are part of the solution. And so, as we all know, if you have people that are going to be part of the solution and organisations that are going to be part of the solution, then we have to come around the table and work together. So that's the importance of the multi-stakeholder process. But moving into the future, I think what we will need to do more of as a community is to do more sharing of what lessons we can draw, because we are so limited in resource. And if you just look at the manpower question, the woman power question, if you look inside countries, even the wealthiest countries of the world that would be considered well-resourced in every other dimension, they will say to you they do not have enough people who are experts in cybersecurity available to be employed by their companies. So resource challenges, and they're not just faced by what might be considered the poorer nations of the world. Resource challenges in cybersecurity are faced by everybody, and that's a challenge that we as a community are going to need to address, and we're going to need to share, and we're going to need to work together in order to raise the baseline. And at the same time, we're going to need to come together to try and deter and take down the level of threat and aggression that's generally proliferating cyberspace in order to make it more practically possible to defend and maintain our system's integrity.
Sadie, thanks for that super helpful points. And I think you raised the issue also of the necessity of skilling. I think that's certainly also an area that Microsoft we've been focusing a lot on. One thing is capacity building, but also broader, even basic IT skills is going to be absolutely necessary as we look into a world where we unfortunately will continue to be faced with a threat from cyber attacks as well. I think also your point towards the end, if I'm not misreading your comment, is also the fact that we also need to get together on discussing sort of the broader policy issues, the norms for cybersecurity, cyberspace, which is of course one of the big themes here in Paris. I also just want to notice in this regard that of course of the more than 1,000 signatories for the Paris call, only 100 are coming from Africa. So I think that's one of the issues where we would love to see a further development over the next couple of years, that as we increase the awareness of the importance of this, that we'll also see more signatories come in to join here. Sabine, I'd like to turn to you now and perhaps dive a little bit more into the developing cooperation angle into it. You've alluded to it already. I think it would be enormously helpful if you could share with us how you are indeed trying to mainstream the cybersecurity aspect into your various development programs with your partnerships. Because I think, again, one of the challenges here is that regardless of whether you work with healthcare or education, governance per se, I'm not objective of this one, but I would definitely argue that you need to have a cybersecurity component being, a necessary, a base part of those programs. Can you share with us how you're working within GIZ on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a good question, and I have to admit we are not yet there. No, so I think what you said is a huge challenge, really, to bring it in each and every activity. But we are more and more convinced that this is important, and therefore, as I said before, you have to really to start at the moment when you design a project, look into the aspects regarding cybersecurity. And if I give you an example, we work a lot in the financial sector, and if you look at Africa, it is very common to pay through phones since few people have a traditional bank account, and the mobile devices are especially vulnerable regarding cybersecurity issues, phishing attacks, etc. So this is really then an important issue now when we work in the financial sector, to look into the safe use of mobile banking, and also in this increasingly looking also in micro insurances, because they are vulnerable now. And so therefore we are also supporting central banks in various countries to improve their cyber capacities, and also make sure that the customers are not the ones who have to be the burden of lacking cyber capacities. And so I think you have to look into each and every sector and look where are vulnerable points. We are working in e-commerce, e-governance. There also the question of data protection is a crucial one. So if we are starting in good governance projects with e-governance, so we have really to look into data protection and cybersecurity. So this has to be a crucial part of this in the design of this kind of activities, and if it is in the water sector or wherever, because if you have important infrastructure, you have to protect this important infrastructure also against cyber attacks. So this has to be introduced in each and every sector. And we have to work this together also with our partner countries, because we have very different levels of development of cybersecurity in our partner countries, because there are some countries that are really far developed, and others they still lack legislation, they lack also really the awareness. So and we have really to there's no blueprint. So we have really to go into the special condition in every country, look where are there now. And we did also together with the African Union an assessment now, also to identify special issues regarding the cyber security in the different countries. And we have to take into account when we are developing different development activities in the sectors. So we are totally right with what you said, but I would say we are not yet there, but we are working on it.
Sounds good. And Sabine, if I can be a little bit cheeky and ask you a little bit rhetorically, we're talking about capacity building around cybersecurity in Africa at this session, but to some extent, do we need capacity building in our developing cooperation agencies to make sure that we're actually able to provide the kind of assistance that is more needed than ever before? And what I'm of course alluding to is that sometimes when you hit new challenges, also and global challenges, we have to reinvent and relearn a little bit, including inside foreign ministries or inside development agencies. And of course, perhaps some more operational questions. Are you doing that? Are you trying to bring in people with the right skill sets that can help drive these programs forward in a way where you integrate cybersecurity from the beginning?
I couldn't agree more, because as I said before, you have to start at home, and we had and we still have work to do also in our own organization. And as also Sadie has said before, it is quite difficult really to recruit specialists in this area, and this is internationally really a challenge. And it's a challenge for us in the industrialized countries, and it's also for us as an organization really to find the right experts we can mobilize also for our projects, and to bring in this specific knowledge where we have some in our company, but not enough. So we are trying to build this up. Now we have a program also to increase also the level of knowledge in our staff, and also to recruit more specialists. But it's not an easy task. So you are totally right. We also at the level of the development agencies, we have a lot of work to do still.
Great, and thanks for being very honest. I highly appreciate that. Towela, I'd like to turn back to you and perhaps ask you a question about what can we do and how can we do best in supporting you as we go through, developing the resilience against cybersecurity threats in the next couple of years. So if you had a wish list, both for developing cooperation partners like Sabine, but also for the private sector, including Microsoft, what is the most important thing seen from your chair? Are we talking about skilling? Are we talking about, help with the regulatory efforts, which is going to be super important? Or are we also talking about sort of digital capabilities in making sure that we build systems that are more resilient against cyber attacks? And, nobody is listening in, so you can just be very free and direct with all of us. What can we do more of?
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good question, and thank you for the blank check. So I think always when we start talking about initiatives and whether it's in the context of development cooperation or otherwise, I think the aspect of co-creation is very important. I think we need to make sure that whatever initiatives that we are wanting to develop, whether it's at a continental level, regional level, bilateral level, that element of co-creation exists, so that there is that mutual understanding on both sides in terms of, number one, what are the needs, what are the expectations, and what can concretely be achieved. I think also that it's important to work within established structures and frameworks and to really also look at enhancing and supporting existing initiatives. So we don't always have to start afresh or start anew. There's a lot that's already going on, and we need to find ways of how we strengthen what already exists. I think Europe and the developed world, I think they have much to offer to Africa in terms of expertise and experience sharing, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that that experience sharing can also go both ways. So it's important to create that atmosphere where there can be that double-sided transfer of experiences that helps us to all achieve what we are aiming for. A lot of need, I think, we've talked about capacity building, we've talked about the GFCE project, which I think is a very important project in terms of addressing specifically, understanding what are the needs, designing specific country-based interventions, and then creating the knowledge modules that would support that. Further to that, though, I think what maybe might also be need to be looked at, and especially maybe from the development cooperation perspective, is institutional capacity building. When we looked at the assessments that we did as part of the Malabo Convention and really trying to understand how we could help countries to unpack some of the requirements, we found that there was a lot lacking in terms of institutional capacities and institutions that were needed to deliver on cyber capacity and cybersecurity. So I would also place quite a lot of emphasis on that aspect as well. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks a lot. And Sadie, sort of almost the same question to you, but if you can twist it a little bit, seen from your chair, also from an academic point of view, from a research point of view, if you had to highlight a couple of areas where you think we haven't aced it yet, where we can do more, both in the private sector, but also with international partners, and perhaps touch upon this multi-stakeholder approach that many of us are preaching, because we think that is really what perhaps differentiates the digital era from previous eras, that we do need all stakeholders around the table. The private sector among the first responders when it comes to cybersecurity, that's a fact. You mentioned before that the private sector both owns and runs some of the infrastructure that we have around today. So, Sadie, in your wish list, and I don't know if it's a blanco check, but what do you think we need to do more of?
Yeah, well, I think we need to do better with our imaginations when it comes to trying to foresee risk emerging. And the reason why I say that is because I think that whilst we're all busy investing in capacity and preparing for the worst, we're also getting increasingly dependent on digital. And from where we sit in Oxford, we believe that there's hidden risk that's aggregating out there in cyberspace, and we're going to have to do better at trying to anticipate it. And if I can link to the pandemic, the possibility of a pandemic was on many national risk registers. It was not unforeseen. It's just that we didn't imagine it was about to happen to us. And perhaps we underestimated the degree of harm that might be caused to our societies globally. So it could be argued that we weren't prepared enough. I would say we need to watch out in cyberspace too. So there's an element of, let's just make sure that we're holding ourselves to account enough as we benefit from cyberspace and digital, and we're really thinking about how we're building complexity into the system, how we're introducing the possibility to be attacked, and are we really doing the level best that we can to understand the harms that might emerge. And that holds true no matter where you are in the world, and I think that's important for all organisations. Just as I think about Africa and what we're learning and what the priorities could be there, I think that could be reflected down. I mean, we need to make sure that we are thinking about emergency response, that we're going beyond strategies to protection of critical infrastructures, that we are exercising. And when I say we exercise, we prepare for incidents. Well, that will involve business, owners of the infrastructure, as well as first responders, incident response, making sure you've got all the partners in place. So I think that's where the priorities should sit on a global stage, is that to really think what might this be like? What might the attack feel like? And to ensure that we are really thinking about the process we go through when we face it. And let's just hope we don't face it on a very, very systemic scale, because that would be incredibly testing right now.
Sadie, thanks very much for that. And I had a really good question to Sabine here towards the end, but I've been threatened that the Paris Peace Forum will come physically into this room and drag me out if I go over time. So Sabine, I hope you can forgive me. We unfortunately have to wrap up what I thought was a really, really interesting discussion. The question to you would have been, can we use the EU-Africa summit in the beginning of next year that President Macron has announced as an opportunity for also making the connection between cybersecurity, development cooperation, increasing the partnerships between two continents that are neighbors and partners and will continue to be so. But we'll leave that as a teaser for future discussions. I want to thank all three of you for really interesting intervention on an issue that I think is both timely and unfortunately also an issue that I think will stay with us. We need to do more. We're committed to do that in Microsoft, and we're really appreciative to the Paris Peace Forum for putting this on the agenda today. Thanks very much to all three of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.